Hi guys, I'm going to go over some of the expectations for your year-end assessments, focusing on percentage, ratio, and rates assessment. Before we go over examples from the actual assessment itself, we first need to go over place value. Okay, so when we are dealing with whole numbers, way back when you were really young, you would deal with numbers such as 246. Okay, and you learned that the numbers here, right before the decimal, were your ones. These were groups of tens. And these here were hundreds, groups of hundreds. Okay, and then as you carried forward with your math career, you learned that you can also have part numbers. So we divide or separate the whole numbers and the part numbers by a decimal. Okay, so what a decimal is showing us now that the numbers that are following after the decimal are part numbers. They are not wholes. Okay, so they would be represented with under a decimal or in a fraction form. So if we had, okay, they follow the same pattern. We don't call this place value the oneths though, because if you have 1 out of 1, it's a whole number. So this, we have our ones here, our decimal, and now we're breaking our numbers into smaller fragments of tenths. Tenths. Then these are now even smaller. We're breaking something into 100 pieces. So these are hundredths. So not hundreds, hundredths. And then these are even getting smaller yet. These would be broken into 1,000 pieces. So thousandths. And these would be 10,000ths, 100,000ths, a million or millionths. Okay, so they follow the same pattern as the place values that we learned for our whole numbers, except they are tenths. They end with the THS, okay? And that means that they're broken into smaller pieces. Hundreds means it's 100 whole objects. Hundredths means it's a object, one object that's been broken into 100 pieces, and we have parts of that, okay? So you have to make sure that you are understanding that. Now, sometimes when kids are doing something like this, where I'm asking you to convert from a fraction to a decimal to a percent, they get a little confused. Don't worry about it, okay? Let's break down how you can do this quickly and simply, okay? So if you have to break anything down and change it from a fraction into a decimal and into a percent, okay? All you do is if you have the fraction, so this is 2 out of 300, but we'll change it up a little bit for the sake of not giving you the answer, okay? Let's say you had a fraction like 4 out of, let's say 4 out of 400, okay? There's your fraction. Now, to find your decimal, all you do is you take out your calculator, okay, and you put this into your calculator. When we have a fraction, this line means divide. That's what the divide sign actually represents, is one number divided by another number. Okay, so that's going to give you your decimal, is if you just take it and put it into your calculator. 4 divided by 400. And it gives us a decimal of 0.01. Or the way we would say that is we have 1 in the hundredths place value, 1/100th. Okay? And if you look at that, This tells us the percent, because a percent, the best you can get on any test is 100%. Percents are always out of hundredths. So when we look at our place values again, when we're looking for our percents, these two place values, your tenths and your hundredths, are the ones you're going to be using to tell you what percent you have. Okay? Sometimes you might use your thousandths to round up a percent, and we'll talk about that later. But for now, we look at this and it shows us we have 1/100th of a percent. That means we have 1 out of 100. If you got 1 right out of 100, you'd have 1%. This number here is your percentage. You're going to look for these two numbers directly following the decimal. We have 1%. Okay? Now, if a question gives you a decimal, so this is 0.345, we'll change that to 0.265. Okay? Same thing, we're going into the same place values. We're working in the thousandths, which is fine. Okay? Now, what I said before is when we're looking for our percentages, you're looking at these two place values. Well, we have two place values there. However, this is an example where we look at the other place value and decide, are we going to increase our percentage? So this tells us we have 26%. Okay, right there, 26, done. 26 out of 100. But we have a 5 here, and we know the rule of rounding is if you have a 5, you're going to round it up to the next number. So percentage, I would either, there's two answers I would accept in this case. I would accept 26.5%, so 26.5%. Or if you're saying you're going to round that up, 27%. Okay. Now, to find your fraction, all you do for your fraction is you take your number, the number that you see, 265, and then you put it over whatever place value that is. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Oh, that means we're over 1,000. Okay? 1, 2, 3 place values. 1, 2, 3 zeros, holding place value. Okay? All right. Then there will be times where you might have to convert a percent. Okay? So for example, here it's asking you to take 75%. Okay, let's do it with 63%. Okay? We have 63%. Remembering how to write this as a decimal, it's 63 out of 100. So you can either put that into your calculator if you're struggling with that. 63 divided by 100. And it shows you your decimal is 0.63. Okay? So you literally just take your percent, put the decimal in front of it. Okay? Hold your place values, though. Be careful. If it's a smaller percent, 1%, you need to make sure you hold your place values with your zeros. Okay? All right, and then if you write that as a fraction, pardon me, you take your number, 63%. Oh, 63%. In French, that means out of 100. And there's your fraction. Okay? Where you have to really watch, though, is an example like this. This is 0.95%. I'll do 0.63% just to show you the difference between these two. This is 63 whole percent. This is a very, very, very small amount. It's 63 hundredths of a percent. Okay? So this is a bit different. This is 63%. This is 63 hundredths of a percent. And that's where it can get a little bit tricky, okay? So if you have that, if that's your percent, remember percent means out of 100. Take your number that it gives you for out of 100, 0.63, put it out, divide it by 100. That gives you your decimal. 0.0063. Okay? So there is your decimal. Now your fraction, you take your two numbers that you have here, 63, and you count how many place values we're going to fill with zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you fill 1, and then you put 4 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is 63/10,000ths. It's a very, very small amount. It's taking an object, breaking it into 10,000 pieces, and only having 63 of them. Make sure you know how to convert, okay? Another thing you have to be very aware of when you're doing your test is the difference between whole numbers and part numbers. So for example here, it's asking you to fill it in with less than, greater than, or equal to. Make sure you're understanding in these cases where you have something like this is 3.21, if I went 4.63 and 463, okay? 400 whole percent, 400, there you go, 4 whole objects, 63% more, 63% more. These are equal. Make sure you're understanding that, okay? All right, guys, that's for level 1, and I'll have another video showing you how to do the rest of it. Take care.